Wow! Fiery red Mars. Mars is at its brightest until the year 2035. In late September and early October 2020, that is, these days, the Northern Hemisphere's harvest moon shines in the vicinity of the brilliant planet Mars. I remember years ago reading the poet Waldo Emerson describe beautifully, if the stars should appear one night in 1,000 years, how would men believe and adore and preserve for many generations the remembrance of the city of God which has been shown. But every night come out these envoys of beauty and light the universe with their admonishing smile. I love the image of the stars as envoys of beauty and light. Envoys are integral to the history of salvation. Isaiah in chapter 33 verse 7 speaks of, "Look, their brave men cry aloud in the streets. The envoys of peace weep bitterly." The US Special Envoy to the North of Ireland, Mick Mulvaney, met the Minister for Foreign Affairs, Simon Coveney, this week. In July 2014, Mary Robinson was appointed by the United Nations General Secretary, Ban Ki-moon, as his special envoy for climate change. It is often said, when envoys are sent with compliments in their mouth, it is a sign that the enemy wishes for a truce. Our parable today features envoys sent by the absentee landlord, who at the harvest time sent his messengers to collect the fruits and produce of the land. Absentee landlords are traditionally intensely disliked in Ireland. In contrast, appointments like George Mitchell have made the office of envoy popular and respected. The Methodist preacher Aidan Hamilton argues that God's role in superintending our world and our lives is neither absentee landlord or micromanager. If the landowner is God in the parable, and the parables are challenges to change, and at a time when so many tenants are fragile and vulnerable, then I believe Aidan Hamilton is hugely helpful in helping us to tolerate the image of God as landowner. God is not so much absent nor a micromanager. Rather, God seeks to work through the tenants, understood as those in leadership, the tenants in the parable. God completes God's superintending role by sending messengers. Though the messengers in the parable travel together, they are envoys rather than convoys. They come in peace and not protected by armed forces. Terry Waite was the Anglican church envoy to Lebanon when he was kidnapped in 1987 and held hostage for 4 years. In an interesting and varied career, Waite had in 1980 negotiated the freedom of hostages held by Iran, and in 1984 achieved a similar outcome for captives held in Libya. Terry Waite offers a a revealing insight into the dynamics of successfully freeing hostages. He writes, freeing hostages is like putting up a stage set, which you do with the captors, agreeing on each piece as you slowly put it together. Then you leave an exit through which the captor and the captive can walk with sincerity and dignity. I have a cousin called Paul, and he works as a professional in assembling stages all over the world in pressurized contexts to prepare for concerts and performances. He relishes his job, and he can describe the integral and pivotal components for the corners and the backbone of the stage. Paul always speaks about the stage and the spotlight. Between Terry Waite's description of stage setting as integral to freeing hostages and Paul's expertise of the nuts and bolts of stage setting, I have gained a new understanding about Jesus' reference to cornerstones, which hold the wall of a building together, or the capstone, which crowns and holds up an arch or gateway. Jesus was God's ultimate messenger. Jesus is the messenger that we are to model, the ultimate envoy. Jesus, in the final part of the dialogue, having told the parable, offers insight to the chief priests and the elders by quoting Psalm 118. It was the stone rejected by the builders that became the cornerstone. He then marvels in God's masonry. Jesus and the stories of those who replicate his way of being peaceful envoys are sharing a stunning message that from pain and rejection, hope can emerge. That from darkness, the spotlight can begin to shine. From aridness, a harvest can flourish. Terry Waite, in his book, Taken on Trust, speaks of his discovery. If you are bitter, it will eat you up and do much more damage than the people who have hurt you. He adds, sometimes the wheels of justice grind slowly. He sums up beautifully by making the case that at the end of the day, love and compassion will win. The wicked tenants in the parable are not destroyed, but the promise is taken from them. These days, you may be lucky to see the harvest moon shine brightly. As the spotlight focuses on the stage, that is God's city. God entices us towards the envoys of beauty, towards the door on the stage that exits us from captivity and that which drags us down and leads us on the path of dignity and sincerity. May God's admonishing smile greet you. Amen.